What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary with episode number 256 of Just Jets. What's going on? I am excited to get into this one with you as the New York Jets search for their head coach and general manager rolls on. Another week in January, and we are still kicking this thing right along as we head into the divisional round of the playoffs. Wild card weekend, I thought, was relatively boring. I thought there was only really one good game, and that was the Bucks and the Commanders. Every other game felt like it was pretty one-sided. The Ravens were in control the entire way. The Bills went down early, but they were in control pretty much the whole time after that. Eagles were dominant. The Rams ended up beating up on the Vikings. The Texans started slow, but they ended up coming on strong against the Chargers. So not a ton of great games. Divisional weekend is my favorite weekend of the NFL, so I am amped up to watch games for this week. I really am. I think it's going to be a great time. 2 games Saturday, 2 games Sunday. It's going to be the perfect amount of football. But as we focus on the New York Jets on this show, I wanted to talk to you guys about the coaching search and the general manager search. Both things are heavy focus right now for this New York Jets team, and for good reason, because you need both of those things. And the Jets have, or the NFL in general, in a few weeks will have, the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl and the Combine. Like, that stuff comes up quicker than you realize. It's a very quick offseason, and then by the time you know it, it's March and it's free agency. And then you blink in the drafts here, and away we go in 2025. But I like the idea of casting a wide net, that theory, right, for both the GM and the head coach spot. With that in mind, I think there's a line between casting a wide net and throwing shit at the wall and hoping it works. And the Jets are leaning or steering more into the throwing shit at the wall and hoping it works. Yesterday, the Jets added a 16th name, 16 guys to the list for their head coaching search, and that was Joe Witt Jr. as the most recent name. Now, he's the defensive coordinator for Washington. It's his first year in D.C., the much improved unit. He's a longtime cornerback coach in Green Bay from 2009 to 2017. He bounced around from the Browns and the Falcons and the Cowboys as a DB coach and a passing game coordinator. I did a full video on it yesterday, so if you want my full take on that, go back and watch that. But just overall, this is really more so about of how this search has gotten, I'm not going to say out of hand, because they could still land this thing and come away with, 2 good candidates for both the GM and the head coaching spot. It's getting to be a huge number, though. 16's a lot. There are a ton of guys on this list. And here's the updated list right now. Guys that they interviewed: Aaron Glenn, Matt Nagy, Ron Rivera, Rex Ryan, Steve Spagnuolo, Jeff Ulbrich, Darren Rizzi, Mike Loxley. They requested interviews from Brian Flores, Josh McCown, Joe Brady, Arthur Smith, Vance Joseph, Joe Witt Jr., Bobby Slowick, and Brian Greasy. And that's just the coaches. There's another 15 names for the GM list. So we're talking about a total of 31 names that the New York Jets are considering for these 2 positions. It's a lot. And I'm not saying go the New England Patriots route, where it was essentially Mike Vrabel or bust. And yeah, they had Ben Johnson in there, and they had a couple of fake Rooney Rule interviews that they had. That is not what I'm advocating for. That's not what I'm saying the route that the Jets should be going. But what I wanted to do was kind of just show you the difference of the last few times the New York Jets have hired head coaches. I have the numbers. I don't have 2015 included. I don't know why I didn't include that, but I have 2021, 2019, and 2009. The numbers from those head coaching searches. So the Jets hired Robert Saleh in 21, Adam Gase in 2019, and Rex Ryan in 2009. Now, the last time they did this in 2021, the Jets interviewed 9 different people for the head coaching spot, which is obviously a pretty sizable number, but they ended up landing on Robert Saleh. And at the time, it was pretty well respected, that hire. He was liked around the league, good defensive mind. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. 9 people was the interview list. That's pretty normal. That's a pretty normal number. 2019, the Adam Gase year, they interviewed 9 candidates as well. You had names, in addition to Adam Gase, you had names like Matt Rule and Todd Monken. They wanted to reach out to Matt Campbell, although he denied their request. So it might actually be technically 8 guys that they ended up interviewing, but they wanted to interview 9. There was a decent amount of names on that list that the New York Jets were considering. And then they end up on Adam Gase because they get a phone call from Peyton Manning advocating for his guy, Adam Gase. He calls up Christopher Johnson, and he sways him at the final hour. They pass on Todd Monken. They pass on Matt Rule. They pass on Mike McCarthy, who's now available again, and a number of other names. 2009, the Rex Ryan year, they interviewed 8 candidates before landing on Rex Ryan to be their choice. That's 8 guys is a pretty nice sized list. Four names is maybe not doing your due diligence. 16 names and growing by the day? Are they going to hit 20? How many guys are we going to talk to here? And some of these are just unserious candidates. Like Jeff Ulbrich, I guess, gets a courtesy one, but Darren Rizzi, Mike Loxley, Joe Witt Jr., Brian Greasy, Vance Joseph, Arthur Smith. I know they like Arthur Smith, but he put together just an absolute disaster class in the playoffs and down the stretch for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think he did a really good job there with them, but I am just shocked to see the length of this list. It's double, essentially, where they were 3 out of the last 4 they did it. In 2015, it came down to Todd Bowles and Dan Quinn. I feel like were the big names that the New York Jets were interested in. I don't remember or don't have it offhand how many names they actually talked to and interviewed. I don't know why I didn't think to look up 2015, but I have obviously 09 and 19 and 21, and none of the searches have been like this. This is a lot. Obviously, the 33rd teams, their job was to cultivate a list for the New York Jets. But wasn't the job also to narrow it down too? Like, I feel like we're just overloading Woody Johnson's brain here with too many candidates. Be like, all right, you got to pick out, narrow this thing down to 8. And maybe narrow it down to like 4. And then a final 2. And then a 1. And then you hire your guy, clearly. But 16 and 15 for the general manager? Is that not getting a little absurd? Again, at the end of the day, if they get it right, I'm not going to care that they talk to this many guys, and that's part of it, and this is part of their process. It is fair to question what or how this process is going, because they got a long run on it. They fired their head coach way back in October, so they have had a long time to think about who they've wanted to talk to. General manager was done in week 11? They were the first team to clear their general manager and head coach. They have a head start on everybody. So I just think by now, at least, the list should be getting shorter and guys should be weeded off the list rather than names continuing to be added to it on January 14th. Yesterday, January 14th, we get more names added to it. So if any more names get added to it, I guess I'll update you, right? Like, that's the only thing that we could do here in this situation. But it's getting to be enough is enough. We're getting, this is too many names. Too many names. Narrow it down. Let's get into your calls. We got a few calls to get into this week. We're going to start with Max from New Jersey. He wants to share his best candidates for the Jets. All right, let's get into it.
This is Max from home New Jersey. So last week we were talking about top head coaching candidates. Here's some of my top general manager candidates compared to the head coach. So my number 1 general manager candidate is Ray Agnew of the Detroit Lions. And the reason why I want Ray Agnew is because he's very good at turnaround. So when Ray Agnew was on the Rams were not, before Ray Agnew was on the Rams were not very good. They were mediocre 7-9 seasons. When Ragnar took over the Rams with Sean McVay, they went to the Super Bowl in 2 years. Even though they lost the Super Bowl, when they got Matthew Stafford, they won. And then when Ray Agnew went to the Lions were in a situation. They had no direction. They had a failed head coach in Matt Patricia. With Ragnar's help, they hired Motor City Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's turned around the culture, so Ragnar's my number one. I really do not like the Jets are not offering Ragnar an interview because I feel like he could turn around this Jets team because the Jets team right now has no culture. We've been out of the playoffs for the last 14 years. The Ragnar could be a good GM to fix the problems with the Jets. He can help us turn around the team. My second GM option is Thomas Dimitroff.
Okay.
The reason why I think Thomas Dimitroff would be a good GM is he had previous general manager experience. He was the GM of the Atlanta Falcons, and in his tenure with the Falcons had like 10 or 11 like winning seasons. The Jets haven't had a winning season since 2015. So Thomas Dimitroff, he was also very good at drafting. My only concern is the downfall in Atlanta because he can't draft defense, but I feel like his draft history, and if we get Dimitroff, we might get a defensive head coach. But I mean, I would not mind a defensive head coach. I said last week that, a defensive head coach can't work in today's NFL. I mean, I just think a defensive coach needs to have a strong offensive coordinator because with Saleh, what happened with Robert Saleh is he didn't have good offensive coordinators. So if Thomas Dimitroff hires a defensive coach, say Aaron Glenn, for example, or Rex Ryan, we need to have a strong offensive coordinator. And then my final GM candidate is Mike Borgonzi. He turned around the Kansas City Chiefs. He made the Chiefs. He's been the Chief for a decade. He's the right-hand man to Brett Veach. He's very good in scouting, and his analytics can help the Jets turn around. What are your thoughts on my three GM candidates and go Jets?
So Agnew has not been interviewed by the New York Jets, and I don't know if he will be at this point. From the Lions, they have talked to Chris Spielman, who is in more of an advisory role with Detroit, but they haven't talked to Agnew. Agnew's a name that I wish he would have been towards the top of my list as well. As Max mentions, he was with the Rams from 2017 through 2020 as the director of pro personnel. They did a lot of really good work there. Obviously, with the Rams, they went to the Super Bowl in that 2018 season. Then they won it in 2021, the year after he left, but he helped set the foundation there. And then he's been the AGM in Detroit the last 4 years. And I think he was absolutely be someone that is deserving of getting a look. The Thomas Dimitroff and Borgonzi names, those are two of my top three candidates as well. Borgonzi served a ton of different roles in the Kansas City Chiefs. I know people just go, oh, well, the Chiefs have Mahomes and Andy Reid. Of course they're going to be good. And, that's the only reason why. And, we have no idea how much Borgonzi has been involved in their success, but what I do know is he was there before both of those guys and moved up throughout the organization before either one of those guys got there, or at least before Patrick Mahomes got there. And Dimitrov's done it. He's at the NFL level. He got a team to a Super Bowl. They probably should have won the Super Bowl. They're up 28-3 in the third quarter. Find a way to win the game. So he built a Super Bowl caliber roster. So I think your list is good. And then just final note on the defensive coaches thing. We're looking at in the playoffs right now, you have Dan Campbell, who is a tight end, not really a play caller though. So offensive coach by nature, but not so much offensive mind. Dan Quinn is a defensive coordinator. You have two offensive minds in this next NFC matchup between the Eagles and the Rams and McVay and Nick Sirianni. On the AFC side, Sean McDermott's a defensive guy going up against Harbaugh, who's a special teams guy. And then you have DeMeco Ryans, who's a defensive coach, against Andy Reid, who's an offensive guy. So depending on who who that head coach is, let's just talk top candidates that it feels like it's most people now that Vrabel's gone. On the offensive side, you have some who are like, I want to see Joe Brady get hired. And then there's a lot on the Flores and Glenn train. If Flores comes with a Josh McCown, let's say, or if you get Aaron Glenn come with a maybe the pass game coordinator, Tanner Engstrad of the Detroit Lions, I think that gives you a little bit of optimism that these guys can build an offensive staff. They've been on very successful offensive staffs, both those guys. So you kind of just got to put your faith into, the defensive coach being able to put together or find an offensive coordinator who could build a really good staff and get the most out of their unit. That's got to be the hope. And I think most likely it's going to be Glenn. I would put Flores number 2. And then after that, it feels like a wild card. I like Joe Brady. I don't know if the Jets do as much. They might prefer someone like a Matt Nagy. Doesn't really do it for me, but that's someone who, they might look to consider for the position. So good call, Max. Thanks for sharing your favorites. Let's go out to Vinny from Peekskill, who wants to talk some Aaron Glenn.
Hey, man, it's Vinny from Peekskill here. I'm going to, call him as, shortly after the news of Vrabel to the Patriots have come out. My God, that was so predictable.
Yep, unfortunately.
And just, no, yeah. Well, obviously with that off the table, my feeling is at this point I think it's going to be Aaron Glenn. I know a lot of people are maybe more on the Flores train. I just feel like that's just my gut feeling right now, and I'm okay with it. I know we wanted the veteran head coach. I know most people want the veteran head coach. Part of me would, still has the fear with Flores with the Patriots assistant, curse thing. And one of the things I like about Glenn, I think what he brings to the team, is very few people actually bring this thing. When you're a former player, it's like you have a better understanding of divisional games and the rivalries between the divisional opponents. And, I think you bring a certain extra level of intensity to those games that, simply no other coach can bring. Because, it's different, from everyone who can say, we got to beat the Bills, we got to beat the Dolphins, we got to beat the Patriots. But, it comes from a whole different perspective when, you yourself have played in those very games. You know the intensity of those games. You know the intensity that those games bring, It's a completely different perspective when you yourself have been in those games. And, you can tell players, look, these games are no joke, and you can make sure that they're going to be intense. And I do think, the Jets have, at times in these divisional matchups, lacked that intensity.
Fair point.
Over the last few years, So remember it last year getting blown out by the Dolphins. I remember at this time, when the Bills dropped the 40-burger on us this year, they have their moments where they just completely just do not try in these divisional games. And I think, with a coach like Glenn, who has, like I said, played in these games for the Jets, he understands it, and he's going to ensure that the intensity is met. And I think that's a good thing. That's all I got, man. Always go Jets.
I appreciate the call, Vinny, and I think that's a really good point and something that Aaron Glenn would be able to reference. And I feel like a lot of teams point to, one of their first goals is win the division. Obviously, winning the Super Bowl is everyone's goals, but winning the division and playing well in your division. And I think of Aaron Glenn being on the Jets throughout the 90s and seeing different eras where he played. His last year with the Jets was 2001, which is the year that the Patriots won their first Super Bowl. So he wasn't there for the full Tom Brady dominant run, but saw the Brady era, was there he was there in his beginning of his career, the end of the career for Dan Marino and his dominance. But if you look at the 98 Jets, who are, 12-4, the best team of my lifetime, even though unfortunately I was too young to really remember and appreciate them. They were incredible in their own division. They split with Indianapolis. They swept Miami. They swept New England, and they swept Buffalo. So they had one loss in the division. They lost to the Colts, the Rams, the Ravens, and the Niners. So they lost to two NFC teams. So that's not even in your conference. So that if you're going to lose games, obviously you want to win every game, but losing NFC teams probably means the least to you. And then the other one was against the Baltimore Ravens in week 2. who wasn't a very good team. They went 6-10 that year, but as we know, strong defense in that era. It's hard not to be impressed with what Glenn did here during his time. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler with the Jets. He was there during their, the heyday of Aaron Glenn, Bill Parcells, into Al Groh, into her first year of Herm Edwards, was on two playoff teams, was a part of teams that won games. In his first year, Pete Carroll was his head coach. So he was coached by Pete Carroll and Bill Parcells. Yeah, a couple of Rich Coach type years in there. Not ideal, obviously. Hopefully didn't pick up much there. But I think it's hard not to be impressed by the people that Aaron Glenn has been around. Parcells, Pete Carroll. As a coach, Sean Payton, Dan Campbell. It's intriguing stuff to me. So I think he would be a really good hire for the New York Jets. Last call of the day is Peter out in the beautiful Hudson Valley. Peter, what do you got?
Hey, Matt. It's Peter calling from up in the beautiful Hudson Valley on this Monday evening. And after most of the first round of the playoffs, wild card is over. One game tonight, of course. Wouldn't it be nice to see the Jets play in that? I mean,
Yep.
Small piece of business was watching the games on Paramount Plus, the CBS game, and seeing Jets commercial for 2025 season tickets come up, and it's like, why can't we just be playing in the playoffs at that time instead of worrying about the season tickets for next year right now? Anyway, on to coaching and GM search, and obviously the news coming out that we dodged a bullet. Rex Ryan will not be with the Jets. Yes, thank God. Anyway, I see Ryan's video talking about the combination of Grigson along with Aaron Glenn and McCown. And while I understand it sort of might be a package deal to get all three of them, I'm still not necessarily set on Grigson as GM. I'd rather see someone like Bergonzi or Sullivan, someone with a little more experience over, even if they haven't been a GM yet, get that type of post. And obviously I'd still rather see Flores over Glenn, someone with actual head coaching experience. But if it's Glenn and McCown, who do you see them doing on the defensive side who might already have some type of better coaching experience than those two guys, has more time in the NFL or as a DC? I mean, I don't think they would obviously retain Jeff Holbrook in that, in that role. Just like I don't think they'll keep their special teams coordinator, Brant Boyer, the cockroach who survived several different, stints through the years with the Jets. So just let me know your thoughts on that. I'd like to see, obviously, this coaching staff rounded out with some veteran presence besides just Glenn and McCown if it winds up being them. But again, I still think Flores is the best overall choice, and Vrabel going to the Patriots. Well, it happened. It is what it is, and hopefully the Patriots get fined for skirting the Rooney Rule. So let me know your thoughts on that, and as always, go Jets.
Thank you, Peter. So I do some prep for this show, so I have an idea of what the voicemails are going to be so that I feel like I could respond appropriately to them and answer these questions. And I think it was an interesting one, and I did a little bit of digging, and at first I came up with a name. I was like, well, he's been a D coordinator a couple times, maybe, but I found a better name that I think fits what Peter is looking for. So Aaron Glenn is going to be a first-time head coach. And assuming in this scenario laid out by Peter, you're going to get a first-time offensive coordinator in Josh McCown. They're talented and ready to go, I think anyway. But you need someone who has the coaching experience. And I think I found that guy. Mike Zimmer. So, who is Mike Zimmer, in case you don't know? Longtime Vikings head coach. Was the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator this past year. Now, obviously, Mike McCarthy is out, so I would assume that Mike Zimmer has been on the market or will be on the market. He's been in the NFL forever, for a really, really long time. I know the Dallas defense wasn't great this past year. They were banged up and they weren't a great team overall. But I think he fits what the Jets need. Runs a 4-3 defense. Glenn transitioned a little bit more 4-3 this year. I think that's what the Jets, with their personnel currently, are going to need to have. And if you're looking for the connection, right? Obviously, Glenn and McCown, like that's an obvious connection that a lot of fans want to see. Aaron Glenn played for Zimmer when he was the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys his first go around in the year 2005 and 2006. So that's another guy that Aaron Glenn played under and has a relationship with. I don't know if that's exactly who we would hire. Like, there's no way for me to go, oh yeah, Aaron Glenn's gonna, he's just gonna take, Mike Zimmer, let's say. Maybe he takes someone from his staff that he currently has as a defensive coordinator in Detroit with him along the ride. That's possible. But if he's looking for an outside name, and if he's looking for a name that has head coaching experience, I think Mike Zimmer's a really good option for the New York Jets and for Aaron Glenn or for any first-time head coach. Usually, like, you'll see, for example, Sean McVay, when he was made head coach of the Rams, young, up-and-coming offensive mind, they paired him with Wade Phillips, a defensive coordinator who spent time as a head coach, and it worked wonders. Mike Zimmer coached the Vikings from 2014 through 2021. He was 72-56, a .562 win percentage, made the playoffs 3 times. His best year was a 13-3 season in 2017. But he was Dallas's defensive coordinator from 2000 through 06. He went to Atlanta in 2007, Cincinnati from 08 through 2013, and then he was the Minnesota head coach for a while, and then finally got back into football after 2021 this past year in Dallas, and was the defensive coordinator. Had some damn good defenses. 2003 Cowboys defense ranked first in yards, second in points. 09 Bengals defense fourth in yards, sixth in points. And then from 11, 12, and 13, they were top 10 in both of those categories. Minnesota in 2016, 17, and 18 were top 10 in yards and points allowed. So I know, again, this past year in Dallas hasn't been great, but this is someone who's at least a proven head coach, has had success at this level, and could maybe help a first-timer like Aaron Glenn along. So I think that would be my answer to you. Guys, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments on the Jets head coaching search. What do you think is going to happen here? I'm Matt O'Leary. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next time.